If I'm looking at or I'm dealing with a client who says, I have a narcissistic boss, not all the time, but most of the time, we can trace those patterns back to their childhood. And we can trace their coping mechanisms back to their childhood. In most family systems, there is what's called a golden child. Then you have what's called the scapegoat. The scapegoat child is the child that typically sees the inequity of how his brother or her brother and sister are being treated and starts to speak up and say, it's not fair. You know, what's interesting that you're saying is when we work with people who come in, whether it's an intimate partner situation, whether it's a parent or a sibling or a workplace situation, what we're really trying to do is hone in on what are the adaptations.
100%.
What are the adaptations that you have developed? And how is it showing up for you in that space?
Welcome back, everybody, to Flip Your Mindset. I am your host, Stacey Uhrig, and today's guest is none other than Kimberly Weeks. Now, if you are new to the podcast, you may not realize this is episode 6 with Kimberly, all in and around the concepts of narcissistic abuse and coercive control. If you're not new to the podcast, you'll know this is our 6th episode. And this is our final episode in this series. And first of all, I am so eternally grateful to Kim for her time, because this takes time, guys. That's 6 hours of her time spent with me, which is, I know, very, very valuable. It's such a get for you guys because her knowledge on narcissistic abuse is so extensive. I had asked her, she's been my mentor. She is the co-founder of a school that I'm certified through. She's been a mentor to me in not just the trauma space, but the narcissistic abuse space. And I had asked her to do one episode with me back at the beginning of the year. And she was so kind to give me her time. And I think at the end of the episode, we were both like, there's so much more to share. And then after that one, there's so much more to share. And I think one of the things that is in alignment with the two of us is that we both have this deep need and passion to educate people, because I think people know that they are in something that's not right, but they don't necessarily have the language. And I think Kim found herself in that position at one point in her life. I found myself in that position at one point in my life. And once we had the language, it opened up a lot of opportunity for us to understand what we were going through and to learn what we were going through. And each one of us came into it from different angles. And so we've covered everything from just, the foundational, what is narcissistic abuse 101? We talked about, should I stay or should I go? Because this is such a huge concept for people. And, most people don't want to be in a toxic relationship, but there's so many nuances as to why it's difficult to make the decision to stay or to go. Then we talked about, okay, I want to go, but I'm frozen. Why do I keep going back? Why can't I follow through on this? And that's a really intensive conversation. It's an important one to understand. And I think a lot of people live with that challenge. The 4th was I had the guts to do it. We have filed, whoever filed, we're going through the process. And oh my God, I didn't know that you could use the court system to further abuse someone. Last week's episode 5, is the one that I think has hit the hardest. It is the one that has gone most viral. It is the one that is getting the most play. And that one was all about this concept of coercive control, which is a component of narcissistic abuse. Narcissistic abuse does not exist without coercive control. And it's very covert and it's very hard to pin down. And because it's so covert, you're in something, but you don't understand that you're in something because you're constantly told that you're the problem, in addition to a whole bunch other hosts of factors. This is the last episode of the series. And this one came out of so many people coming to me and saying, this series has been great. However, this is not an issue with my spouse. This is an issue with my parent. This is an issue with my sibling. This is an issue with a friend. This is an issue with my coworker, my boss, my pastor, my child, or my grandparent, whatever it is, it can be beyond the marriage. And I really wanted to address that because I think a lot of people are struggling with it. And I don't think that beyond the marriage is actually addressed enough. So this is going to be where we're going to go with it today. Unscripted. I'm not prepared with any kind of questions, but I know that we both know it well enough to just jam out.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome back, Kim.
Thank you.
And guys, you want to follow Kim on Instagram before I forget, it's I am Kimberly Weeks. So Kim, narcissistic abuse, coercive control outside of the marriage.
Yes.
Where do we even begin?
It's interesting that you would ask this question because I believe for people who say, and typically when people come to me and say, this is not a problem with my partner, this is my parent, this is my sibling, this is my family system. Once we start looking at the nuts and bolts, as we have already outlined, of what narcissistic abuse is, manipulation, gaslighting, control, all of those different things, what they start to see is it is a different flavor in their marriage. It is a different perspective in their marriage. It isn't as intense as what they came from in their family system. And because of that, they don't even identify it. So what we start to do is unpack the basics of what it means to be in a relationship with someone where you are not free to be yourself. You are not free to express yourself and use your voice. You don't have your world revolves around their moods, their plans, what their desires are, almost like the solar system. Typically in a narcissistic family system, there is one person who is the sun in that solar system, and everyone else orbits around their wants, needs, desires, and directives. And so, most of the time, if I'm looking at or I'm dealing with a client who says, I have a narcissistic boss, not all the time, but most of the time, we can trace those patterns back to their childhood, and we can trace their coping mechanisms back to their childhood. And so typically, there is a pattern of that person's coping strategies, whether that is people pleasing, whether that is being very codependent and trying to fix and please other people so that they're safe. Typically, their coping strategies are showing up in these different relationships, and they are rooted in something that took place in the first 7 to 10 years of their life.
So I love that we started there because let's just start with work. Right? Because a lot of people know that they're in a toxic work environment. And one of the things that I've talked about a lot ad nauseum on stages and podcasts is burnout. Mm-hmm. And, burnout to me is a culmination of many, many coping strategies, brilliant coping strategies that were developed, like you said, in that first 5, 6, 7 years of life that are very coveted by organizations.
Yes.
Right? Overextender, perfectionist, people pleaser, the big one, no boundary setting. Mm-hmm. What do I need to do to get your validation? So we become this amazing overachiever. And what I always say in my talks is we get praise and promotions for it and a lot of pay.
Yes.
However, we're not in alignment because we're in a hustle. And the organization often, or the boss or whomever, often takes advantage of that. And it's not a grooming process per se, but when they're hiring, they know what they're looking for. And so I'm curious to what you think. I don't think it's as intentional initially when they're in the interview process, but when the person gets into the role, And of course, everybody in a new role of an organization wants to impress,
Mm.
wants to make sure that you know you were a good hire. Now it's like just fuel on the fire
Yes,
because you're hustling and you're proving your worth and you're proving that this was a good decision. And then there's a line that you cross when you've stopped kind of being in this initial phase of I need to make sure you know this was a good decision to now this is my method of operation and I don't know how to backtrack out and I'm burning out from it. And this is the big part, the organization is taking advantage of it.
that's right. Yeah. And what's interesting is what there's a runway that each new hire has. I've been a director, I've managed teams of people. When you come in, people are, as you said, they're trying to prove themselves. And without them knowing it, a part of them that is a young part of them shows up in the workplace. The part that wants mommy and daddy's attention, the part that wants to be seen in school by the teacher and raises their hand a lot. And it's the like, oh, I have the answer. And so there is this mixture of a competent employee that has a skill set and a mixture of a younger part of them that knows how to play the role of the good child in an environment that can take care of the responsibilities, can shine for the family system, can be the person that is the high achiever. And so there's these two elements at play when people enter into a workplace environment who haven't yet resolved these coping mechanisms from their childhood. And so when that happens, the employer, not all, but many leaders in corporate America, in large companies,
High
in
up.
politics, in all of those things are very high in narcissistic qualities.
Right.
So when a person who's high in narcissistic qualities or tendencies sees a person that is going to perform on a hamster wheel for them, something gets incited in them.
Yeah. I mean, it's pervasive. And one of the things I wrote down is there's a fine line.
Mm-hmm.
Some workplaces are toxic.
Yes.
We have to call that out. And there's a culture of toxic masculinity. I'm going to go there. Okay. And I'm going to use an example of someone else that was on my podcast at another time because it's a great example. Sometimes the workforce is not toxic, but to your point, it's the way that you learn to navigate life, that you are now navigating life from this hustle culture, regardless of whether or not that is the organization's culture, and you're burning out. Okay.
Correct.
So let's distinguish between the two. I had a great interview with a woman named Jamie Fiore Higgins about 6 months ago. And Jamie became a managing director at Goldman Sachs. Now, only 1% of employees become managing directors at Goldman Sachs. 0.01 of those managers are women.
Wow.
Okay. This is a boys' club. Here's the other thing. People who become managing directors at an organization like this often, not all the time, are groomed for it at a young age because there's nepotism. Like perhaps one of your parents is on Wall Street or they're in these big, financial firms in New York, say New York, because I'm living here. And so they're kind of bred for it, right? They go to private school, they go to the Ivies, like it's a system.
Right.
And the end goal is that. Now, in her case, it was very unique. She was first generation here, Italian immigration. Okay. And in that kind of system, and you and I both see this when we're working with people who are first generation, there is an unspoken and often spoken rule of we must do better than the generations before us. So there's pressure. Now, she wrote a book called The Bully Market. And the bully market was thrown out, to the marketplace by Simon and Schuster. She got this great book deal because it was about the misogynistic, narcissistic culture of this particular organization, which is Goldman Sachs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I found interesting when I read her book as a trauma specialist, this was not lost on me, that she starts at the beginning of the book of how she had scoliosis as a child. And her family was just getting by. Her parents had come here to start a family and to have the American dream, and came with nothing. And so now she felt as though she was a burden because they had to take a lot of time off of work and there was a lot of money involved and all of these different things. And so when she went to college, she was the first person in her family to go to college. She felt this need to and it was the mantra, do better than what we did. She wanted to be a social worker, and her family said, no, you can't be a social worker. You'll never make enough money. So she was oblivious to Wall Street and these financial firms and hedge funds and private equity. Like, this was not a sphere she was familiar with. She happened to go to a talk on campus from a recruiter, a woman recruiter, and she was intrigued. She knew nothing about it. She went, she applied for this internship. She got it, which is incredibly difficult to get. And she worked up the ranks in 25 years. And as she was in this, she recognized it was toxic, but she was making so much money. And there were two messages coming to her. One was from her family, which is, you just made more in 1 year than our entire family made in a lifetime. You cannot leave. You are the golden child. You are the American dream. On the other side, she had this toxic organization saying, you're nothing without me. You would be nothing without us. You think you want to leave? You'll never work anywhere else again. So we hear this in these narcissistic marriages. You'll never find love again. Nobody will ever want you. So this was the mantra. No one will ever want you. So there's this fear-based tactic and hustle, 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 and so much misogyny, so many horrible things. It's a horrible environment for women. And then on this other side, you have this pressure of, what do you mean you'd want to leave? Are you kidding me? Like, wow, how bad can it be? You're making millions of dollars a year. So she got crushed in this vice, if you will, of pressure, because she wanted her parents to be happy with her. She wanted to be grateful and give back to all the sacrifices that they made for her in her childhood. This was her coping strategy, right? I want to show you I'm appreciative. But on the other side, she had people saying to her, who do you think you are? Do you think you're special? You think you're actually good at this? You're lucky that you're in this position. You're lucky that you're even here. No one else is going to want you. And it was her journey. It's a fascinating book, very easy to read, of all that she went through in that process, and then how she actually broke free from that very abusive workplace and having to resolve and disappoint her family.
Yeah, and the expectations of her family. She was without agency everywhere she turned.
Everywhere she turned. And my favorite part of this story is that, she made quite a bit of money. So there's some freedom there. She ended up leaving and she went back to her original school where she got her bachelor's, and she's getting her master's in social work.
That is incredible.
Full freaking circle.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah. But what you just displayed very well is what can happen when family system dynamics show up in the marketplace.
Right.
Whether it's golden children, whether it's scapegoat children, whether it's lost children, orbiting around that narcissistic abuser in the family system, or the person who has those narcissistic traits. I did a post about narcissistic bosses and how they identify the different types of children in the workplace, and the different types of some people would call them moles, flying monkeys, intel, monitoring people who gather the information, who go and make friends and get in little circles and all of that stuff in order to give that boss or director or CEO intelligence on what's going on to keep everybody in the system in line. And what's interesting is that in those dynamics, whether we realize it or not, the unconscious programming from our family systems has to be reckoned with, because it's going to show up, because it's going to show up. And if we're not aware, we literally begin just going through the motions of what we did, which many of us, it was performing, it was grades, it was being the student body president or the senior class president or the whatever we needed to do, being out in front, being the person that says, hey, yes, I want to be seen, but I want to make people proud, as you said.
That's right.
I want my family to be proud of me, and doing whatever is necessary. Or you have people who are the lost children, who are the rebels in the family, and whatever their way of dealing with their family system dynamics shows up. They're the person that, goes off in the meetings. They're the person that says, I'm not doing this work because they're making us do busy work. And they just stir the pot, just like they did in their childhoods, in the environment at work. And so one of the things I think is important for people, when people come to me and they go, oh my gosh, I've got this crazy situation happening at work. What we start looking at is this: how are you operating from what you really desire and your free will and your choices and what you need in that space? What does that look like at work for you? How are you asserting yourself? How are you setting boundaries around your, especially time boundaries? The number one thing that happens in the marketplace is the violation of time boundaries. And time boundaries meaning last minute, like you got to do this and it's got to be perfect and you got to turn it around. And that's just you being proficient. It's not, there's no consideration of anything going on.
Or you put on your calendar, you're not available, and they still book you for a meeting.
Correct. Yes. All of those violations of time boundaries. So I start asking those questions, and then we go into, and where did you learn that?
So I think that that's a really good segue, because you've kind of dropped the seeds of the different types of children, the different roles, I should say, that children play in a narcissistic family system. Okay. Yes. So let's veer that way, because I want to try to cover so many different angles from this while we can. So pulling back from the work and we going back to the prequel, if you will.
Yes.
We've got a system where one or both parents are very narcissistic. It doesn't usually work really well when both parents are very narcissistic. It tends to be more combustible because they really don't, but it happens. Okay.
It does happen. Yeah, it does.
So what you're talking about, what people may not realize, is there are roles that the parents end up assigning,
yes,
without giving it language, to each individual child in the family. Yes. So Susie Wendell Miller actually wrote a really good book about this. I have it back here on my bookshelf somewhere. Let me get it so I can read it to you. It is Nurturing After Narcissism, Raising Thriving and Resilient Children After Divorcing a Narcissist. So that's Susie Miller Wendell. I'll put that into the show notes. But in it, she really lays out the structure of these different roles. So let's talk about what the different types of roles are that are kind of assigned to children in a family, in this kind of family unit.
And of course, this is if there are multiple children,
That's
when
correct.
it's the only child, that there is a role that's assigned to that child. But in every family system, in most family systems, there is what's called a golden child. The golden child is the child that the family looks to be a representative of the goodness of the family. They are the ones that they invest in. They're the ones that they structure typically the family time around, whether it's sports, whether it's academics, whether it's robotics and engineering, swimming, whatever it is. Everybody in the family has to revolve around this golden child's what they're trying to get that golden child to be. It could be someone who's an Olympian. It could be someone who is an actor. It could be a child that they're trying to get into some position where they're doing some, wonderful thing. Typically, it's acting. But the golden child is the representative for that family. That's a good family.
And is it fair to say it's because the parents assign their value and their worth to the golden child?
Yes, they actually vicariously live out perhaps dreams they didn't get to do to that child, especially sports, athletics, any kind of performance-based situation. And that child is groomed, conditioned, and raised to want to go after what those parents or that parent desires for them to do so that they can be pleased with them. But because they get a lot of attention, This is sometimes the making of narcissists in childhood. Because everything revolves around that child, and they don't have to do things they don't want to do typically. They may not have to do chores and different things. If you think about, is it Cinderella and the stepsisters?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's that kind of, everyone else in the family does lesser work, but we got to make sure that this child is going to the basketball tournament or the swimming meets or, whatever it is. So that goes
fair to say they're putting them on a pedestal.
They put them on a pedestal. A lot of times, unfortunately, it could be the child that's most attractive in the family. It could be the smartest child. It could be the most athletic child. And they
the most talented child.
The most talented child. They put all of the stock of the image and reputation of the family on this child, making it big. And so a lot of financial investment goes into that child, time investment goes into that child, and to the expense of the other children in the family. That's right. So that's the golden child. Then you have what's called the scapegoat. The scapegoat child is the child that typically sees the inequity of how his brother or her brother and sister are being treated and starts to speak up and say, it's not fair. Hey, why don't I get to do this? Why doesn't anybody come to my things? Why? And so what ends up happening is that child is a threat to this system that their parents are trying to create, the image that the system is trying to create. And because of that, that child then gets assigned everything that goes wrong gets dumped on that child. They're the reason why.
Difficult one.
They're the difficult ones. They're the rebellious ones. They're the ones that have the mouths. And they don't get as much attention except negative attention. And they don't get as much investment, nurture, financial support. Their goals, dreams, and desires are not seen as equal to that other golden child. And because of that, they're not supported in going after the things that are unique to them and that are passions of theirs. That's the scapegoat child. And then in some family systems, there's a lost child or a combination of some of these, the scapegoat and the lost child. The lost child is the child that sees all of these things going on and tries to stay under the radar for safety. Yeah. And so they're very quiet, compliant, submissive, and don't ask for a whole lot. You'll hear some parents say, well, they were never any trouble. They never gave us any trouble.
They're the easy one.
They're the easiest. They're so easy. They'll do anything I ask. Right. And they do. And they do. And in the middle of that, that child who is the lost child in the family isn't being invested in, cultivated, nurtured. Um, they're really not even seen. It's almost an invisible position in the families.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
and,
you,
and
go ahead. No, I'm
I
sorry.
was going to say, what is interesting is those are the roles that are assigned.
Yeah.
And when someone steps outside of their role at any point, they can move around in different functions, meaning if the golden child starts to assert his or herself, stand up to that narcissistic parent, they can then become a scapegoat for a season. They can go through a punishment of being not supported or not until they get back in line, until they get back in the function they've been assigned in the system. And so, what I've heard when I talk to clients is that they realize in different seasons of their life, now that they're adults, that they played different functions in their family system depending on what was going on with other kids or with other adults in the system, which
Mm-hmm.
is very it doesn't always happen that way, but it does happen that anyone that tries to challenge that system and the image, again, you're going back to anyone who has not high narcissistic qualities, is highly concerned about image and reputation. So any child, if a child gets pregnant, if a child, gets into some problem with an addiction or law enforcement, anybody that steps out of their function is going to be met with wrath because they're affecting the image of the family.
Well, this is where the devalue and the discard come in for
Absolutely.
for the child. And I think, one of the things I mean, I have a million thoughts going through my mind, but one of them is think of the impact that then that has on the dynamics of the siblings.
Yes.
Okay. Think of the impact that it has on you when we talk about, and we all hold space for this as practitioners, where people are talking about their childhoods, and in
Mm.
theory, each child's lived the same childhood in the sense that they had the same parents in the same home and the same values and the same system in that way, but they each have their own unique interpretation of that, and there
Yeah.
tends to be discord. So when I'm holding space for a client and we're starting to identify some of this kind of narcissistic or toxic system within the family unit, I'll often say, tell me about your relationship with your siblings. Oh, I don't
Mm-hmm.
have a relationship with my siblings.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I want people to start to just gain an awareness of, in many cases, and this is very typical in a narcissistic family system, the children are pitted against each other because if there is an alignment, or if there is a unified approach, the system can't stand.
That's correct.
And
Yes.
so whoever the narcissistic person is in the parental caretaker role, they will covertly find a way. And a lot of ways that they do it is when, you're in the car and you're on the way somewhere, they start negatively talking about the other child or the sibling, or
Yes.
they'll start to try to influence the other child's impression and interpretation of their sibling, and start to influence the relationship. So there is a fracture, and so there is a divide, and that is a very strategic play, but it is a very intentional play, because
Yes.
it's united we stand, divided we fall.
Yes. And often they will do that with, if there is a narcissist and then another parent who's a codependent, they'll do that with the other parent. The narcissist will plant things in the minds of all of the children towards the other parent.
Absolutely.
They will tell the children not to trust, see the other parent as competent. You don't have to listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about. They'll do a lot of that kind of pitting the kids against the parent who is being abused. And then when the children are alone with that narcissist, they'll do the same thing with their siblings. And they'll do it like, oh, such and such said you did such and such. They start revealing secrets that one of the children, is sharing. They may even, just straight up lie and say that the sibling did or said something against another sibling, just so that there is that distrust, that discord, and that divide.
Right.
And over time, children are growing up, and so they get to be 18, 19, and 20, and they haven't cultivated safe connection with their siblings.
That's right.
What they've cultivated is being in this kind of bubble where there is this tension, where everyone's walking on eggshells and everybody goes to their own kind of safe zone, which is typically bedrooms or the basement or someone else's house.
Right. And I want people to understand that each child coming out of this environment has a sense of not enoughness.
Yes. And performance.
And what I often hear is one's a super high achiever, right? Because remember, these are all adaptations, guys. I'm all about the adaptation. So one becomes a super high achiever because maybe that will be enough. The other tends to say, well, I know it'll never be enough. And that pain is so great. They're often, not all the time, becomes a child that has an issue with substance abuse, or they're getting themselves in a lot of trouble with the law. And then again, you have one that's just kind of neither. They're not the overachiever. They're not getting trouble in the law, but they're kind of underachieving and just keeping small. It's so important. You guys know I'm a book person, right? So I have a lot of books, and the book that's coming to mind for me right now is one of the best books I've ever read. It always goes down in my top 5. And it is What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. And I was at a conference, a Bessel van der Kolk conference, and he said, this is a great book, What Happened to You by Bruce Perry. But he said, but the better title would have been What Happened to You and Who Could You Go to? I know. That's how I felt.
Wow.
Right? I was like,
wow.
Yeah, that's so accurate.
It is. It is, because Gabor Mate talks about the trauma is the fact that you were in whatever circumstance alone, and you didn't have anybody to go to.
He might have actually been the one that said it, because this conference was so good, by the way. It was the Trauma Foundation, the research foundation in Boston. The speakers obviously were Bessel van der Kolk, but then he also had like Janina Fisher. He had Gabor Mate. He had Dick Schwartz. I was like, this is like the rock star conference. Like, I don't miss that. And it's not a big one. It's so I went because I was like, if I can sit in a room with these great minds, yes, please. But it is that it's we judge, and it makes me so crazy. We judge people who are incarcerated. We judge people who become addicts. We judge people who become homeless, and we never, ever, ever stop to say, what happened? And what was your support system?
That's right.
And wow, at the end of the day, it actually kind of makes sense that you're where you're at. Because when you don't have that support system, and where are you going with this feeling?
Right.
Where are you going with that?
What are you doing with it? Yes.
We don't have language to it when we're young. We just don't. The only language we have is, I'm the problem. I don't feel enough. It must be me. Because in the child's eye, the parent knows best. There's no concept of my parent is walking with their own baggage or their own invisible backpack, and their behaviors are a byproduct of their raising and their multiple generations ahead of them. There's no concept of that.
Right.
You're the parent. You must have read the book on Parenting 101. You know all the things to do. You obviously know what's right or wrong. This is the mindset of someone under the age of 9, 10, 11, 12. And so therefore, I must be the problem.
Yes. Yes.
And it really breaks my heart. This is why I love this book, What Happened to You, because he's so, have you read it? Did you ever read?
I've read portions of it. I haven't read it all
Let
the
me
way.
tell you, I think one of the reasons why I love the book so much is, first of all, I think Dr. Bruce Perry is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole book is just a conversation between Oprah Winfrey and him.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them has green text, one of them has blue text. So you're just reading a conversation and questions and answers. And if you listen to it on Audible, it's essentially like an 8-hour podcast
Right,
because
right,
it's just the conversation between the two of them. They're both in it.
right.
And I've recommended this book to so many clients. It has been such an eye opener
Mm-hmm.
for so many of them because there's all this shame of I'm not enough. And when they read it, they go, oh my God, it wasn't me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what
I was set up to fail. I was set up for all of this. And my coping strategies were actually brilliant coping strategies, normal responses to this incredibly abnormal circumstance. And
yes.
I'm older now and I have more resources now, and I can reframe this in a way where the parts of me that needed to develop during that time no longer are responsible with the burden of keeping me safe. I mean, that's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And what's interesting that you're saying is when we work with people who come in, whether it's an intimate partner situation, whether it's a parent or a sibling or a workplace situation, what we're really trying to do is hone in on what are the adaptations,
100%.
what are the adaptations that you have developed, and how is it showing up for you in that space? Is that something that you want to continue? And
That's
if
right.
not, where literally looking at where is that held in your body?
Right.
Where is what happens in your mind? What are the thoughts that come up that are repeated? Like you said, I'm not enough. I need to do more, etc. Like what's happening inside of you? We can study all of the signs, the 10 signs and the 5 ways, and we can do all of that. And all of that has a place. But at the end of the day, the transformation, regardless of where these tactics and manipulation environments show up, is going to be in you, as you said, identifying the adaptations, giving that part of you so much gratitude for getting you here, because whatever it was, and it doesn't matter if it's addiction, it doesn't matter what adaptation it was, it got you here. You survived that situation. And now what do you want to do to help those parts that didn't get to develop now? We can still go through that development. It's not lost. The it's not a, oh, well, I just have to live this way. This is what is beautiful about neuroplasticity and the way our brains are made. We can still develop new adaptations. We can still develop new ways of being.
I mean, how many people
Stop.
come in and just sit down and I say, maybe it's a first session and I'll say, what brought you in? And they go, I'm just so broken.
Yes.
And I lean over if they're in person and I hold their hand and I said, first things first, we're never going to use those words again because you're not broken. You adapted.
That's right.
You're not broken. You yourself are not flawed. You lived in this particular environment. You had to find a way to survive it. You found ways to survive it and
Mhm.
cope, and those ways no longer work.
That's right.
That's all that we're looking at. And I think when we simplify it and bring it down to this very basic measure, they often look at me and go, oh, I have so much hope now that like I
Yes.
don't have to feel this way.
Yes.
And so I think it's really important that we recognize that, especially in this, because that narcissistic abuse, that covert and that coercive control is so damaging to our
Yes.
psyche and our sense of self, which is the goal, that it feels like an impossible task to pull yourself out of that hole. And I always use the analogy of an invisible backpack. And I just say, listen, we're all carrying it. And so
Mhm.
I literally have like a see-through bag. And in my see-through bag that I bought, that I use for talks and I use in demonstration to my clients, I have little ripped pieces of paper and note cards of different experiences that I had that I feel like are core memories for me. And then on
Mhm.
the other side of the paper, I write down the feelings that I had at the time and how I learned to cope. And then I have this like deck of cards that are like parts,
Yes. Yes.
right?
I have
Okay.
those.
And
Yes.
so then I've found the parts that kind of speak to me, and that's also in the bag. And so I'm showing them, look, this is my backpack. Let's talk about what's in yours,
That's right. That's right.
right? What have you had to pack and carry that was smart at the time, brilliant, had to be done? But maybe we get to like reassess what's inside the backpack. And by the way, also inside that backpack are not just your lived experiences and your core memories and your core beliefs and all the parts that needed to develop in survival. It's
Mhm.
also everything you observed, your parents' parts, their coping strategies, their core beliefs, their family myths, and your grandparents and your great grandparents. And another book that I love is called Break the Cycle by Dr. Marielle Bouquet.
Mhm.
These are all my top fives, guys. You're getting my top fives today. That's another book that I could never do my practice without. It is just unbelievable. And she uses the idea of a tree in the book. But one of the things she says is we carry the weight of 7 generations.
Yes.
Seven
Mm.
generations. So this is not to excuse poor behavior. And this is not to give an excuse for someone who shows up in the world narcissistic or who uses coercive control to manipulate and have power and control of other people. But there is a time and a place and a space for understanding what happened to them, not
Correct.
to excuse it, to just understand it.
Correct.
Because
Yes.
if they never do the work and they never stop to want different, the abuse cycle will always persist. So you have to be mindful. And this was my personal experiences. I could look at something and say, okay, I recognize what I'm in. I
Hmm.
also recognize the likelihood that this person ever recognizes this for themselves is so slim. So that is then finally, when I got there, that is my signal that it is the onus is on me to set the boundaries. The onus is on me to look at my backpack. I can
Hmm.
have compassion and understanding and empathy for why you're this way and why you show up this way and why these are your natural coping strategies in life. But
Right.
I must create distance for myself because otherwise I will continue to be on the receiving end.
Correct. And I'm going to deal with the part of me
No
that
doubt.
understands all of that with all that compassion. And I'm going to put a boundary on my own empathy and
Yeah.
desire to fix for you what I see clearly in you and give myself that energy and give my backpack that energy
That's right.
instead of giving it away to you to try to be good to you so that you'll be good to me. That is the classic thing that's learned in childhood, that if I take care of the needs of my parent or my siblings or whomever in an extended family situation, that if I take care of everybody else, then everything will be okay for
Well,
me.
because then they'll see me as enough. And if I'm enough, I'm safe.
Correct. Correct. And so I'm going to rein in, take responsibility for, and put a boundary on myself. And
Yeah,
that part of me that's been practicing that adaptation my whole life.
that's right. And I
Yes,
think it's just so important to have I think this is a great conversation because I know there are so many people that are going to resonate with this episode. And I think the most important takeaway that I always try to leave my clients with is it's all reframable.
that's right.
It's
Yes.
all reframable, meaning we have the opportunity to lay it all out. It's like laying out a puzzle or a map or a blueprint. and saying, this is the way it was, and
Mm.
this is how I had to adjust and adapt to the way it was. But actually, now this is where my life is outside of that. And I'm still living it from that adjustment and that adaptation. I get to do that differently now. So, whether that's in your work environment, whether that's in your partnership, whether you're married or not, whatever maybe one-to-one relationship you have, or maybe not one-to-one, maybe many-to-one relationship that you have, that's you consider an intimate relationship, it influences how you relate to your own children.
Yes.
Right? I mean, this is why we always say it's so important as a parent to do your own work and to look back and say, yeah, I want different with my children, but yet I don't know how to do different with my children. And so this is pervasive into every part of your life. When you come out of an environment, a family system that is narcissistic, nothing gets compartmentalized.
That's right. Yes, it shows up everywhere. And to your the story that you told from earlier, this is really people saying, okay, even though I grew up in spaces where my agency was taken on every side, I'm going to take up my agency now, and I'm going to
Amen.
decide what I want for my life and what I'm literally, I tell my clients, we're going to choose your way to freedom,
Yeah.
one choice at a time.
And I think it's important to recognize, because I know you hear this and I hear it all the time too. The battle in that for the client is the deep discomfort with prioritizing themselves.
Yes. And
Right. And they'll
just
tell
just
you that I
mhm.
don't put myself first. I've never put myself first, which, by the way, you were groomed to do, or that just became your natural, most accessible, smartest adaptation.
Yes.
Okay. But the reality is that you can prioritize yourself. There's just a tremendous amount of shame and
Mm.
discomfort with putting yourself first. And we as women
Yes.
were programmed to be told that that was selfish. And there's nothing selfish about it. It is required. It's required for you to say what matters to me. And I look, I can ask this to 10 women that I work with, what matters to me, and at least 6 or 7 will say, I don't even know.
I don't know. That's right. That's right. Because they've been conditioned and practiced prioritizing everyone else's needs, wants, desires, and dreams. Out of that being their identity,
Right.
making sure that everyone else's stuff is taken care of, not the things that matter to them.
And so just baby steps of getting comfortable with either the idea of having your needs met,
Mm-hmm.
whether
Yes.
it's by someone else or by yourself. And some of that work is just this very simple nuance of tell me one thing, and it could take all session. Tell me one
Mm-hmm.
thing that you would like to do for yourself this weekend.
Yes.
And then when they finally have the courage to say it, the next question is, and how did that feel in and around your system? And they're like, awful,
Yes. Yes.
terrified, sick to my stomach. I can't breathe. It feels so uncomfortable. And then sometimes the work is just, what is that part of you that's present right now that feels so uncomfortable?
Yes. And that's somatic. One of the things
No doubt.
talk to my clients about is what we're actually doing is breaking the addiction that you have inside of you chemically and the
Mm-hmm.
discomfort in your actual physical body of prioritizing yourself. We're breaking the addiction for you to immediately think and move in the direction of meeting other people's needs first. And that is actually happening in your actual body. So when you sit with that discomfort, um, you know, just like an addict, people struggle to be able to get that energy to subside, that part of our system that's activated to calm down again. And what do you do in the meantime, in between time, between having to answer that question and or walk out doing the thing that you want to do for yourself, and the discomfort? What are you doing for your body to take care of that sense that's coming up for you? That's where the rubber meets the road.
And I think we're so conditioned to just want to shut it off so fast. I think this is where your Stand Firm program is so important, because to think you can do this on your own is a misjudgment.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
It is so hard. It's like someone like to your point, that wants to get clean, that's just going to try to go cold stone sober with no support and no sponsor and nobody else that even understands what it's just so much harder than it needs to be. It's already hard. So a program like what you have, Stand Firm, is this beautiful space that's curated for people who are in that need not just the support from you, but from the rest of the people in the group who are also going through it at the same time. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about your Stand Firm program and what that is and why you've developed it.
Yes, I can absolutely do that. Stand Firm is an online transformational space so that women who've been in toxic relationships, no matter where they have found it, in their childhood, with a parent, with a sibling, in a workspace where they're in that kind of corporate container where every space they've been in has been incredibly toxic, or with an intimate partner, have support and training in order to deal with that discomfort on a real-time basis and be supported in making new decisions that help them to have different outcomes. It's really that simple. And I've worked with countless women walking through narcissistic abuse recovery, and I can just see the absolute benefit to having other women that get it, that know exactly what you're going through, who are cheering you on and championing you. And it's two parts. It's a 7-phase recovery process, and I call the first phase triage. We're going to bring you in just like the hospital and assess the damage, and you go all the way from triage to transformation. And it's a 7-phase process. And in the middle of that, we have weekly coaching calls just to be able to get live with each other and support what's going on week to week. And I had my call last night with my ladies, and it's an amazing container for healing. It truly is. It's something special about having people who get what you're going through, who are not going to judge you, who are not going to shame you, who aren't going to question when you go back to your adaptation, but are just going to say, I totally get it. And, we can get back up and keep going. I love it. It's such a wonderful space.
How can people find it, get engaged with it, start with that program?
If they want to get started with the program, what I would like for them to do is go to my website at thenarcissisticabusecoach.com/standfirm. That will give you the information on all the stages. But I would love for you to reach out to me on Instagram at I am Kimberly Weeks, and that's like days of the week. So I can send you a video that goes through the whole process and explains exactly what you're going to be getting inside.
Guys, honestly, if you're listening to this and you're in this, I cannot stress enough, or if you know someone that could benefit, I can't stress enough the value of doing this in a collective.
Yes.
It really, because it is one thing for me as a practitioner to hold space, but there's another thing for someone like Kim to be curating a space of other women who are going through the same thing at the same time. And your point of the no judgment is so true, because every single person in that space is going to have done this many times.
Yes.
It's very uncommon for somebody to cut a tie, or to go no contact, or to go low contact, or whatever it is you're trying to do on the first go. It's just not that common. And so being able to be in a space where not only people can say, I get it and I'm here for you and you matter and I care, but it's also, I was there too.
Yes.
Felt the same way that you felt. And I get it. And that's part of the process because otherwise we just get more mad at ourselves and we have more shame on ourselves and more blame on ourselves. And that just persists this horrible cycle.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, one of the things that, interestingly, I remember when I was going through this coming out of my marriage, and it was a very lonely, trying to talk to people, trying to give language for what my
Right.
experience was. I didn't know anything. I had never even heard of narcissism. I didn't know anything. And it was very damaging trying to navigate that space without information, without support, and having people look at you like you're crazy because you've gone through literal brainwashing and mind control, and you don't even know left from right and up from down, trying to talk about and give voice to what you're experiencing. And I was like, I don't want anybody else to go through that. I don't want anybody else to go through that. That I went through because it was extremely difficult. I developed a chronic illness out of it. I had lesions in my brain as a result of that, and have gone through a lot of recovery to get to the place where I am today. And when I invite women in, whether it's through the community or whether it's one-on-one, I'm hearing those same stories. And it is a gift for me to be able to explain to them what I'm hearing them say and that it's a real thing. They're not making it up. It's an actual disorder. And here are the impacts of it. And to see that little light bulb come on and they go, oh my gosh, wow. Like I thought that I was going crazy. No, you're not going crazy. Not at all. Everything that you're saying, as a matter of fact, makes perfect sense. It's what you
Makes
were saying about Bruce Perry. That adaptation makes perfect sense. And brilliantly, you're able to get through that situation. And I want to help you get free.
All right. Well, this is a beautiful way to end this entire series.
Yeah.
I hope I can speak for the listeners of how grateful all of us are that you've gifted us with your time and your knowledge and just your desire, which is in alignment with my desire, which is to just give the cold, hard facts and to
Yeah.
have a platform for it. So,
Yes.
again, guys, it's Kimberly Weeks. You're going to go to Instagram. On Instagram, she is I am Kimberly Weeks. If you want to check out her Stand Firm, you're going to go to thenarcissisticabusecoach.com/stand firm, or you can go to just the Narcissistic Abuse Coach. And there, I believe on the homepage, you also have a quiz too,
I do.
right?
I have a, is it really toxic
Yeah.
relationship quiz?
Yes.
Yes. And I'm gonna put in the show notes the invitation that goes through a little explanation of the whole thing. So people can just click right into that. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you
Thank you
very
for all of this. It has been a really wild ride.
much.
And a really, I can't express my gratitude enough for your time, your knowledge, your energy, your presence. Um, Thank you so much, guys. If this is your first episode in the series, this is episode 6 of 6. You're going to want to go back into the show notes and look for episodes 1 for 5, all having to do with narcissistic abuse and coercive control from soup to nuts. If you or someone you know and care about are in something like this, you do not need to do this alone. As a matter of fact, I would implore you not to do it alone. It is not for the faint of heart, this walk. But I can say with pure conviction from my own experience, from Kim's own experience, that you actually can get to the other side and
Yeah.
be happier and have more freedom and have more liberties and have a life you cannot comprehend. But to get from here to there takes support. So it's narcissisticabusecoach.com/stand firm. Kim, thank you so, so much for all of your time and energy to this program.
Thank you.